Hello and welcome back to the Sports Sermon. I'm Dylan Staggy.
I'm Jason Gotti.
I'm Ben Majors. I'm John Majors.
And I'm Zach Munson.
And we are back today for more college football previews. Today we are talking about the Pac-12, specifically the Pac-12 North, as you can tell by the title. We will have the Pac-12 South video coming out tomorrow, so make sure you guys listen to both of these. So let's start it off with California. We're going to go through last year, their depth chart, their ceiling and floor, and give a record prediction along with the MVP. So let's start off with Dan with last year. What do you have?
Well, Cal went 5-7 last year, 3-6 in the conference, and finished fourth in the North Division. They returned 14 total starters, 6 on offense, 8 on defense. On offense, they lose Davis Webb, Chad Henson, and Khalfani Muhammad. On defense, they lose Dari Vanderbilt, Cameron Walker, and Devontae Wilson. So, John, what do you think about Cal?
I'm not high on Cal this year. I have them going 2-10 and 1-8 in conference, finishing 6th in the North Division. They have to replace Davis Webb, a good quarterback, but Demetrius Robinson will pick up where he left off at the wide receiver position. They have a tough schedule, a new head coach in Justin Wilcox. Very young team. They're in the rebuilding stage of their career. But they have at UNC, Ole Miss as their non-conference schedule, so they're going to lose those games. Their only wins coming to Weber State and Arizona.
I missed him. Would you have him going 2-10?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm a little higher, but not too much higher. Offensively, Ross Bowers and Chase Forrest try to replace Davis Webb and have the same success him and Jared Goff have at Cal. There's no real clear-cut option at quarterback, though. Demetrius Robinson is back along with all the other key targets in a strong receiving corps, but their big thing is they need to score more touchdowns. The Bears managed to put up points 87% of the time, but the offense only came up with touchdowns 59% of the time. And that was the difference between going bowling and a losing season last year. And like I mentioned, Davis Webb, in 2015, they scored touchdowns 65% of the time when they were inside the 20. And in 2014 with Jared Goff, they scored touchdowns 73% of the time. So offensively, they just got to convert to 6 points more often. Defensively, they have the second worst run defense in the nation. Fortunately, 4 of the top 5 tacklers are back with most of the sack production. And this offseason, there was a big focus on toughening up in the offseason. And that's going to be the separator between a good and bad season for the Cal Bears. It's really going to be if the defense can hold up, the offense will be decent. My ceiling, I know it sounds dumb after hearing Deron say 2-10, is 8-4. If their quarterback can get going, I think running back and receivers are fine. It's just a quarterback play. It's a question mark. If he gets hot.
Defense.
But I think the defense will be okay. Like, it won't be terrible. It'll be okay. It'll be average.
I mean, they ranked 124th.
I know.
124th last year.
The new DC, I think, is going to come in. The new defensive coordinators, I think, is going to help toughen them up. Floor, I have it 3-9. I don't know. I just trust Demetrius Robinson and the running back just to help. I don't know. And so I have him at 4-8 with a 3-9 floor. But yeah, I have them finishing second to last in the Pac-12 North. They have the worst record, but tied for last, 4-8. So I have them MVP, like I said, Demetrius Robinson, coming off a 50-catch, 767-yard, 7-score season. He's not massive at 6 foot, 175 pounds, but being physical isn't his job. He needs to take the top off the defense.
Yeah. Justin Wilcox coming in for the Cal Golden Bears, and they're going to try to definitely rebuild. Trey Watson and Vic Enwerby, both 1,000 career rushers on the offensive side. If they can figure out the quarterback, like Jason said, their offense is going to be really good. Some talent on the defensive side, James Looney, an honorable mention, all Pac-12 pick last year, and Devontae Downs and Raymond Davison on the line at the linebacker position. They'll be solid, but besides that, not a lot of depth on the defensive side. So my ceiling for Cal is going to be 5-7, anywhere from 5-7 to 3-9. I don't see them winning 6 games with that tough Pac-12 schedule, but like Jason, I also have a 4-8 record for the Golden Bears.
Yeah, I have California going 3-9. I don't like them a lot this year. I think their floor is 3-9. Their ceiling, I think, is 6-6. I think if they go bowling this year, that'd be a really big improvement and a shot to the rest of the league. My MVP is Demetrius Robertson. I love Demetrius Robertson. He's so fast. He chose California over going to Notre Dame when he was in high school, so I'm so salty about that. But, yeah, he's a great player. I think a key for them will be the red zone offense. They put up points in the red zone 87% of the time, which is good, but only 59% were touchdowns, and you're not going to be a good team if that's your percentage. And so that's what I have to say.
Yeah, I'm not very high on Cal either. Lose their quarterback, top running back, and top receiver, and then ranking 125th in points allowed and 124th in yards allowed. So I have them at 3-9, 2-7 in the conference, and finishing 5th in the North Division. Also with one of the toughest schedules in the country. So let's move on to Oregon. Went 4-8 last year, 2-7 in the conference, finished last in the North Division. They returned 17 total starters, 8 on offense, 9 on defense. That's the most in the Pac-12. On offense, they lose Dakota Prukop, Pharaoh Brown, and then on defense, they lose Johnny Reagan. And they also have a new head coach in Willie Taggart from South Florida. So, John, what do you think about the Ducks?
The Ducks will definitely have a bounce-back season. With Justin Herbert coming back at quarterback and Royce Freeman at running back, he will be their MVP this season. Willie Taggart coming in as the new head coach. They have to bounce back. 4-8 last year is unacceptable, especially for an Oregon team. I have them going 8-4 and 5-4 in conference and finishing 3rd in the North Division. Losses coming to Arizona State, at Stanford, Utah, and Washington.
Wow. See, Oregon's my surprise team this year. I have them finishing number 1 in the Pac-12 North, and I have them upsetting Washington and taking another game in the Pac-12 South. I love Royce Freeman. He comes back, and I think he's a top 5 running back easy in college football, if not top 3. Combine him with a terrific class of recruits and look out behind the fantastic line they have. The emergence of Justin Herbert as the star quarterback of the show. He threw 19 touchdown passes and 4 picks in 9 games and was one of the big positives in a terrible season last year. The starting receivers are fantastic, the offensive line's outstanding, and the backs might be the best in the Pac-12. As long as the quarterback situation is solid, the Ducks' offense will be unstoppable. So defensively is where it all comes down to. Oregon finished with the 3rd worst defense in the country in both yards and points allowed.
Yeah.
The run defense was bad, the pass defense was worse, and nothing worked for a group that gave up the most first downs of anyone in college football. It starts up front with a change to the 3-4 alignment. They were 4-3, they're back to 3-4 now. Experience isn't a problem with the front 7, and it isn't an issue in the secondary either with everyone back. Aaron Springs made a bunch of plays at one corner spot, and Brendan Schooler made a bunch of tackles to lead the safeties, but it's up to the front 7. The Oregon Ducks came up with just 25 sacks and 61 tackles for loss, failing to bail out a miserable run defense that allowed 200 yards or more in 9 of the last 10 games. So, with all that being said, I love the offense, and as long as the defense can just be average, I think Oregon's going to be unstoppable this year. I have them at 10-2, ceiling 11-1, floor 6-6. I think there is room for them to struggle if the quarterback play, like John said, just if they don't live up to my expectations I have.
The key to their season is Royce Freeman staying healthy.
Yeah, if Freeman stays, I agree. But even if he doesn't, they've got such good options behind him. Not Royce Freeman, but good enough options where I think 8-4 is reasonable if Freeman goes down. That's how I look at it.
Good. He can take them to 10-2.
Yeah,
I could see it.
That's where I see him. I see him going 10-2, finishing first in the Pac-12 North, beating Washington. Both finishing at 10-2, but they beat Washington in the regular season, puts them ahead at number 1. MVP is the obvious Royce Freeman. He's one of the nation's best blends of speed and pop as a running back. Like I said, he's a top 5 running back for next year's draft. It'll be a battle between him and Nick Chubb for an honor of being the best senior running back. But like John said, it all comes down to health for the Oregon Ducks.
Yeah, I'm just really worried about the defense for the Ducks. The defensive line really lacked star power last year after they produced first-round picks Eric Armstead and DeForest Buckner. And the spring depth chart had 3 freshmen in it at some time starting, so you have to be worried about the experience in the defense a little bit. On the offensive side, Justin Herbert, if he can play well, that'll really give them a dual threat kind of action on the offense with Royce Freeman, obviously, as Jason talked about a lot. He is fantastic. Justin Herbert can play well. The Ducks will be awesome. And their offensive line, 4 redshirt freshmen last year, a year older and with more experience. They'll be pretty good this year. But for me, I see this as a clear-cut 9-3 or 8-4 season. I have them 8-4 this year. Only 4-8 last year, so I don't see them making as big of an improvement up to 10-1 or 10-2 as Jason did.
Yeah, I have Oregon going 8-4 and 5-4 in the division, so they're 3rd behind Washington and Stanford. Obviously, their offense is one of the most explosive in college football, but as everyone says, it's all about their defense. Their line and their secondary, obviously a concern. I think that Justin Herbert, I think he's a great quarterback, and obviously Russ Freeman's a great running back. But it all comes down to their defense. Their defense had an interception only in 2 of their last 8 games. So if you're going to be a good team, you have to force turnovers. I think the Ducks can go 10-2, like Jason said, but I haven't gone 8-4.
For Oregon, really, of course, Royce Freeman. I think he could be a dark horse Heisman, depending on the season the Ducks have. If they go 10-2, like Jason said, I think he could definitely win the Heisman. I also see a lot of people saying Justin Herbert as a dark horse Heisman.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really see that, but it depends on how the season goes for Oregon. On defense, they obviously need to improve, like everyone said, and I think they will, returning 9 guys and a new defensive coordinator in Jim Leavitt from Colorado. Who had a great year last year with them. I don't think they can get 6 more wins, like Jason said, but I still have them at 8-4, 6-3 in the conference, and finishing 3rd in the North Division.
I mean, yeah, I think it all comes down to how well the season plays when you go back to the Heisman race. Like, it feels like every good team usually has at least one Heisman guy in the race.
Right.
Like, and so if they do 8-4, probably not. But if they're 10-2, 9-3, 11-1, anywhere in that New Year's Six-ish range of a bowl, then there's a talk for the conversation. I think Royce Freeman's the obvious one from Oregon that could be in the Heisman talk.
All right, let's move on to Oregon State. Last year they went 4-8, 3-6 in the conference, and finished 5th in the North Division. They returned 15 total starters, 7 on offense, 8 on defense. Key losses on offense include Victor Bolden and Sean Harlow. On defense, they lose Caleb Salo, Devin Chappell, and Treston DeCowd. So, John, what do you think about Oregon State?
I'm not a fan of the Oregon State Beavers this year. They have a tough schedule in the Pac-12, and I have them going 4-8 again this year, 2-7 in conference, and finishing 5th in the North Division. They have a solid running game in Ryan Nall. They have a good secondary, but they have a very young team, and they're going to rebuild again this year. Again, 4-8, and last year they were the 105th best offense in the country. That's unacceptable, especially for a lethal attack like Oregon State has been in the past.
Oh, yeah, like you said, I'm not high on the Beavers at all. Offensively, it's all going to come down to Ryan Nall. He'll run behind the young offensive line as the focal point of the offense, but the passing game has to be ramped up. John, you already gave the stats on how bad their offense was. Just a few more. Oregon State's passers combined to hit 54% of their throws with 13 scores and 11 picks, averaging under 6 yards per throw. That's not good, and that's just like enough said about the Oregon State offense. You cannot have your quarterbacks throwing just as many touchdowns as picks and barely completing over 50% of your passes. So offensively, the quarterbacks have to be better. Defensively, the Beavers return their entire front 3 or 4, depending on the alignment, while Manazi Hungalu leads a solid-looking linebacking corps that needs to find starters in 2 spots. The secondary gets back 2 starters in Xavier Crawford and Brandon Arnold, but like Dan said, losing Treston DeCowd and Devin Chappell is a big problem. It never stopped anyone cold and got hammered for 317 rushing yards by Cal, who's known for passing, and 365 by Stanford. Obviously, that was with McCaffrey, but still, the run defense has to be better. I have them at 4-8. No QB, no real wins, in my opinion. Most of the wins come outside of the non-conference and maybe beating Arizona or somebody. Just no real wins here for Oregon State. Rough year. I have their ceiling at 6-6 and their floor at 2-10.
Yeah, for Oregon State, I think Ryan Nall's got to be the guy this year. The problem is they have 3 new offensive line starters, and the passing game isn't going to be too solid. Still looking for a quarterback. And another question, especially on the defensive side, is the defensive line. 218 rushing yards per game and only 18 sacks last year. But they do get everybody back on the defensive line, though. They do welcome back a freshman All-American in Xavier Crawford, like Jason talked about. He should be great this year. I'll give him another win, more than you guys did, at 5-7. Anywhere from 6-6 to 3-9, I think would be reasonable for Oregon State this year.
Yeah, I have Oregon State going 4-8. I think their ceiling 6-6 and the floor is 4-8, or 3-9. Sorry. I think if they go bowling this year, that would be a great season for them. Obviously, if you want to win games, you have to have a quarterback, and I'm not a huge believer in their quarterback situation. But they do have a great running game, and Ryan Nall and Artavis Pierce. I think they have to rely on their running game if they want to win these games. They have pretty good linebackers. An okay offensive line, but the passing game's nowhere near it needs to be. So 4-8 for the Oregon State.
Yeah, I'm not high on Oregon State either. Losing top receiver and only returning 2 guys on the offensive line. Also lose 2 other top 3 tacklers. So I have them at 3-9, 1-8 in the conference, finishing last in the North Division, getting wins over Colorado State, Portland State, and Arizona. Also a very tough schedule here. So let's move on to Stanford. As last year they went 10-3, 6-3 in the conference, finished 3rd in the North Division. Got a Sun Bowl win over North Carolina. They returned 16 total starters, 8 on offense, 8 on defense. On offense, they lose Christian McCaffrey, Michael Rector, and Johnny Caspers. On defense, they lose Solomon Thomas, Dallas Lloyd, and Nord Davis. So, John, what do you think about the Cardinals?
Stanford will be good again this year like they always are. Their key to their season is to find their quarterback and stick with him. Kyler Christ and Ryan Burns will be competing for the job. I believe Kyler Christ will win it. He was the starter at the end of the year last year, but they said they opened up the competition. Also, no Christian McCaffrey, but Bryce Love will step into that role, not as lethal as an attack as Christian McCaffrey, but he will fill that role nicely. David Shaw always coaches a team well and has a solid defense behind them. I'm going 10-2 and 7-2 in conference, finishing 2nd in the Pac-12 North. Losses coming to at USC and at Utah.
I like what you said about Stanford. I'm not as high on offense, on the offense at least. You already talked about quarterback play, and really the thing I'm just going to highlight is how much of a difference McCaffrey's going to be making now that he's gone. And it's going to all come down to Bryce Love. He's going to have to fill in this McCaffrey role. No one thinks he's going to be the next McCaffrey, but at least be able to be a dual threat out of the backfield. It all comes down to the passing game, though. The Cardinals just averaged 6.7 yards per throw after averaging 9.3 in 2015 with Kevin Hogan. If they can balance the attack between Love and the new quarterback, whether it's Christ or Burns, that'll be special on offense, but it's all going to be about finding that balance. Defensively, I think Dan already said it, losing Solomon Thomas is a huge killer, but the secondary gets 3 starters back, including the corner tandem of Quentin Meeks, Alameen Murphy, and as long as a Thomas-less pass rush is as good as usual, this defensive backfield should be among the Pac-12's best. They don't have much depth, though, so health is key. My ceiling is 10-2, my floor is 7-5, and I like them finishing right around 9-3 as they lose 1 key loss at the end, which takes them out of the running for the Pac-12 North, and so they finish in 3rd at 9-3. The MVP is Joey Alfieri, coming up with 51 tackles, 5 sacks, 10.5 tackles for a loss last year. Best pass rusher on the team, and that is what will put the team in contention if they can establish a formidable pass rush.
I think I would really like this Stanford team this year. They're really balanced. The question is the quarterback position. Keller Christ, if he can play well and come back from injury, he'll be great this year and will lead the Cardinal. But at the running back position, they got Bryce Love, who will try to fill in for Christian McCaffrey. And with 4 offensive line starters back, I think he will be able to replace him. Not as well, but he'll do a pretty decent job in McCaffrey's place. Like Jason talked about a lot, they've got to replace Solomon Thomas on the defensive line, but do have a couple of guys with a lot of talent on defense. Harrison Phillips and Joey Alfieri are both going to be great this year, will step up this year and have a bigger role, and the secondary will still be solid this year. So I think the Cardinal finish anywhere from 11-1 to 8-4, but I have them finishing 10-2 this year. A really balanced squad, and I like Stanford this year.
If their quarterback situation improves immensely and their defense continues to be unstoppable like it usually is in the recent years, I think they have the potential to win the Pac-12. Obviously, a great defense, great linebackers, great offensive line, but their passing attack needs to improve if they want to win the Pac-12. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey's gonna hurt their offense, but I think Bryce Love is more than capable to replace him. Not do as well as a Christian McCaffrey, but be solid. My MVP is Joey Alfieri, like many have said already. He's a great linebacker. But yeah, I think they're just gonna fall in at the 9-3 range. I think they have potential to go 10-2 or 11-1 and win the division, but their floor I think is about 8-4.
Yeah, I like Stanford this year. Like everyone said, passing game was awful last year, ranking 117th in passing yards per game. So Keller Christ will have to step up. On defense, they ranked 15th in points allowed. Jason talked about the defensive backs. If Holder and Meek stay healthy in the secondary, then I think they will be fine. I think their ceiling is 11-1, floor 8-4. I have them at 10-2, 7-2 in the conference, finishing second in the North Division, getting losses to USC and Utah and a win over Washington. So let's move on to the Washington Huskies. As last year they had a great season, 12-2, finished 8-1 in the conference, won the Pac-12, had a loss to Alabama in the Peach Bowl in the college football playoff. They returned 13 total starters, 7 on offense, 6 on defense. On offense, they lose John Ross and Daryl Daniels. On defense, they lose Buda Baker, Kevin King, Song Wuching, and Elijah Qualls. So, John, what do you think about the Huskies?
Last year, I did not buy into the hype of the Washington Huskies. I thought they were overrated coming into the season, but I should have went with the hype. This year, I'm going with the hype. They were not overrated. They will go around in the AP poll from 7 to 10. I really like this Washington team. Chris Peterson is one of the best coaches in the country. Did a great job at Boise State. Has done an even better job at Washington. Jake Browning and Myles Gaskin are one of the best running back, quarterback combos in the country. They have to reload in the secondary. They also have a lot of NFL talent out there, but the defense will pick up where they left off. Also, they have to replace the fastest player in the country in John Ross. Dante Pettis will have a great season replacing him as a wide receiver. I have them going 11-1, 8-1 in conference, and I don't know. It was very hard to pick between USC or Washington in the Pac-12 championship game. I'll have them losing to USC in the Pac-12 championship game.
Yeah, I have Washington going 11-1, 8-1 in the conference. I think that they'll be every bit as good as they were last year, if not better. Obviously, losing John Ross isn't great, but the receiving corps is still great. They still have Jake Browning at quarterback, who was Heisman candidate last year, and won't want to relinquish his Heisman candidate spot this year. I think he'll be poised to have a great season. The running game is still strong. Their defense obviously was one of their strong points. They'll be ready to dominate again this year. They honestly don't have a real weakness anywhere. They lost some stars in the NFL, but they had everything in place to be as good as they were last year. So I think that they will make the Pac-12 championship game, and I'm going to say that they lose to USC. I think Sam Darnold will outplay Jake Browning.
You know, I really like Washington this year. They have the potential to run the table, but I think they lose either one game to either Stanford or Oregon. They play them back-to-back weeks. So I see them losing one of those games, finishing 11-1 this year. But they returned the league's highest scoring offense last year, 41.8 points per game. 43 touchdown passes from Jake Browning, who was a conference offensive player of the year. The league's best 1-2 punch with Myles Gaskin and Levon Coleman. They combined for 2,200 yards last year. And at wide receiver, they do lose John Ross, but that's kind of a question mark on the offensive side. If Jake Browning can find some new targets to throw to, that would be a big help for the offensive side. On defense, they are littered with all Pac-12 picks last year. Vita Vea, Zim Victor, and a lot of depth in the secondary. So I like the Huskies finishing 11-1 and beating USC in the Pac-12 championship game.
Well, you guys already heard I have Oregon ahead of Washington, but I mean, there's not much really to go into anymore. Jake Browning, great season last year, lost John Ross. Dante Pettis will ball out. Myles Gaskin played really well last year. He should do the same this year. Really not much to say offensive or defensively. I'll just go right into my record. I have them at 10-2, with their ceiling obviously 11-1, all coming down to that Oregon game. The second loss I have is Colorado. I have all the not USC teams kind of beating themselves. Like I have Colorado, Washington, Oregon, Stanford all somewhat beating themselves. And then I think Oregon just comes out on top. And that's why I have Oregon ahead of them in the standings. So Washington losing to Oregon puts them second in the Pac-12 North. And like I said, Oregon on top. And my MVP is Jake Browning.
All right. I really like Washington this year. Returning 3 guys on the line. Of course, only lose one true offensive threat in John Ross, like everyone said. ranked 7th in points per game. I think Myles Gaskin is a definite Heisman dark horse in my opinion, as he had over 1,400 yards rushing last year and is the best running back in the Pac-12. On defense, they ranked 10th in points allowed and 11th in yards allowed. Buda Baker will obviously be missed. But look for Keyshawn Vieira, Azim Victor, and Vita V to all have big years as they lead this great defense. I think their ceiling is 12-0 with a very, very easy schedule. Floor 9-3. I have them at 11-1, 8-1 in the conference, and they win the Pac-12 over USC in the Pac-12 championship with a loss to Stanford at Stanford late in the season. That puts them in the college football playoff discussion, maybe a play-in game there in the Pac-12 championship. So let's move on to Washington State. Last year going 8-5, 7-2 in the conference, finishing second in the North Division. Had a loss to Minnesota in the Holiday Bowl. They returned 16 total starters, 7 on offense, 9 on defense. On offense, they lose Gabe Marks, Rebecca Kraft, and Riley Sorensen. On defense, they lose Shalom Luani and Robert Barber. So, John, what do you think about Washington State?
Washington State, they're not really going to improve this year. I have them going 7-5, 4-5 in conference, and finishing 4th in the North Division. They have Luke Falk, who will be their MVP. The past 2 seasons and coming into this season, a lot of people think he's a great pro prospect at the quarterback position. He's got to live up to the hype this year if he wants to be drafted pretty high. They do score a lot of points. Defense is young, but experienced. A lot of people got playing time last year, and they do have a tough schedule coming in. That's why I have them going 7-5.
I like Washington State a lot this year. I have them going 8-4 and 5-4 in the conference, but they have the potential to go 10-2 and a floor of 7-5. I like them a
10-2.
lot. Yeah, I think if
Wow.
everything goes right. I love Luke Falk, which is their MVP. I think he's a great pro prospect. I think he's a beast. But they're a lot more than just their passing game. This is a very complete team. Their defense has experience, as John said, and talent. And so they don't have to rely on Luke Falk as much. And the running game is good. And for an offense that can basically do everything with their passing attack and their running attack, obviously Washington State will rely on Falk to carry this team, but they won't have to do it as much. I like them a lot this year, and I think one of their players who is also really good, who has a really cool name, is Hercules Mataafa. Just want to say that.
All right. I like Washington State this year, especially their offense. Like Zach said, they can do it with both the passing game and the running game. Luke Falk, obviously a great guy, an NFL prospect for his senior season this year. And at the running back position, they got Gerard Wicks, Jamal Morrow, and James Williams, who all combined to rush for 1,645 yards and 22 touchdowns last year. The defense returns some more depth, but unfortunately, the Washington State Cougars have a tough schedule, so I like them finishing 7-5 this year.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have hit everything offensively and defensively. Record-wise, I think my ceiling for them is 8 and floor, and my floor is 5-7. I am probably right around average, 7-5, finishing 4th in the conference. About Luke Falk, he's kind of what makes Washington State a team to talk about. He completes almost 70% of his passes, 4,561 yards, 38 touchdowns, and 8 picks, while also running for 3 scores. He's the real deal, at least in college. I don't think he's got what it takes to be a pro quarterback, and you'll hear that a lot from scouts, is that they're concerned about his pro, I guess, potential, but he'll throw for more yards than Rosen, Darnold, and Browning. He's got one heck of an arm, and his passing tech is definitely fun to watch. Like I said, 7-5, and Falk's going to be the star of the show.
Yeah, I like Washington State. It seems like every year they always beat the teams that they are better than, but then they never really upset anybody big. So I have them at 8-4, 5-4 in the conference, finishing 4th in the North Division. Losses to USC, Oregon, Stanford, and Washington. I was thinking about having them knock off a top-ranked team or something, but I don't think they will beat any top-ranked teams, as Mike Leach is 0-6 versus the top 10 and 3-15 versus top 25 while he has been at Washington State. So let's move on to our surprise team out of the North Division. John, what do you got?
I don't really have a surprise team because none of the teams I have on here really did anything I thought they won it. I have Oregon as my surprise team at 8-4. Last year they did go 4-8, so this will be a good season bounce back for them. Jason, what do you got?
I've got Oregon just because, like I said, I have them going 10-2. I think they beat Washington. I like Coach Taggart, and I trust the quarterback play. So I like Oregon as my surprise team.
All right, I have Washington State as my surprise team. I think they have the potential to be really good this year. I love Luke Falk, as I said before. I think they have all the right pieces to have a great season and maybe stun some people and upset, and some great teams in the division. So I have Washington State as mine.
I like Oregon State in my surprise team. I don't think they'll be able to show it with the record because they have a really tough schedule. But I like them to take the next step this year and start to get better and in a few years make it to a bowl game.
All right. I have Oregon, like John and Jason said, coming off of a 4-8 season. Defense will improve with 9 returning starters and a new defensive coordinator, and Jim Leavitt from Colorado. So let's move on to our disappointing team. John, what do you got?
I have California. I'm not real high on them this year, going 2-10. They have a very young team. They're in the rebuilding stage. A lot of guys have to step up for them to be even considered in a bowl game.
Yeah, and I have Cal too, just because I think Cal fans are used to having Davis Webb and Jared Goff, and they won't have that again this year, so it's going to be a disappointing season for the Cal fans.
I have Oregon as my disappointing team. Although they went 4-8 last year, and I think they'll take the next step, they are still very far from their glory days of Chip Kelly, Marcus Mariota, and LaMichael James. I think Jason has them at 10-2. I don't think they get to that and live up to those kind of expectations.
My disappointing team is also Cal. Obviously, like Jason said, Cal fans had Davis Webb to lean on last year. They don't have that this year. So I think they're going to disappoint. I have them going 3-9.
I have Oregon State as my disappointing team. They don't really expect to go 3-9 each year, but their schedule is very tough. So let's move on to the player who deserves a bigger spotlight. John, what do you got?
I have Luke Falk. He's got to step up this year for Washington State. A lot of people think he's a really good pro prospect. It's been like that the past 2 seasons coming into this year. So if he wants that bigger spotlight and maybe first-round potential, he's got to step up.
I promise John and I are not doing our notes together. I've also got Luke Falk, and I think people could argue he already gets enough attention, but not to like the average college football fan. People that watch it a lot know who he is, but the average college football fan have no idea who he is.
Yeah, exactly.
He is a baller.
All right, for mine, I have Bryce Love. He had 783 yards last year behind Christian McCaffrey. Now we'll replace him, and with 4 offensive line starters coming back, I think he has a breakout season for Stanford.
Once again, you got another Luke Falk. I think he has potential to be a really good NFL prospect. As we said earlier, hardcore fans know about Luke Falk, but not the average fan. I think it needs to change. I think everyone should know about his name, and I think that he'll earn that right this year.
All right, I'll go with somebody different here. Myles Gaskin from Washington. He had a great year last year, and I think he'll have a huge year this year as a dark horse Heisman candidate. As you heard more about Jake Browning and John Ross last year. So let's move on to coach on the hot seat. John, what do you have?
I have Gary Anderson of Oregon State. The past 2 seasons, he went 6-18 at Oregon State. That's unacceptable, and I have them losing a lot of games this year. So I don't think he will stay after this season. They'll fire him.
I also have Gary Anderson. He replaced Mike Riley, the winningest coach in Beaver history, and John said everything else.
You know, I'm going to go with somebody way outside of what you guys have. David Shaw. If he has a down year for Stanford,
David Shaw.
if he has a down year for Stanford, I
agree. That's a good pick.
I think he could start to feel some warmth on his seat.
Only warmth I see is he wants to go to the NFL. I don't see him getting
Yeah,
fired
yeah,
at
he's
all.
definitely not
If he
getting
wants
fired.
to
I
go
don't think
pro, I
it's
could see him leaving, but I don't see him getting fired at all.
What did Stanford go last year?
10-3.
And
So if they
having-
have one bad year, why would he be fired?
I mean, if they continue the kind of downward spiral, like last year, he considered a down year for Stanford. If he continues to kind of tumble and go down, I think his seat can start to get warmer.
I think
Maybe at like an Alabama or something, not at Stanford. Like
I just think
Stanford.
I think
Stanford's a top.
I mean, they
program.
had Jim
I mean-
Harbaugh before him.
yeah, and
Like,
he kept the
brought a lot of
ship
success.
going. Like that's how I look at it. Is like they had this. He
Jim
kept
Harbaugh really
Ten
turned
and-
that program around. That program was terrible.
yeah,
before he got
and
there.
David Shaw is helping it now. stay afloat.
he's
like
helping.
10 and
He's
3 is
hurting
not
them out.
disappointing to
Yeah.
anybody but Alabama, and that's probably about it.
Yeah.
Ohio State maybe, but like I don't know. I would take 10 and 3 if I'm Stanford any day after what they
I'd
used
take
to have.
David Shaw as my coach any day.
Yeah, I'll fire anybody and just take him. Like he's crazy good.
I like David Shaw too. I'm gonna go with Gary Anderson as mine. We've already mentioned him twice. Not very much to say about him.
Yeah, there's really nobody else besides Gary Anderson in the North Division. So let's move on to best pro prospect. John, what do you got?
I have Jake Browning of Washington, their quarterback. He's a very good quarterback. I think he's their best pro prospect. They don't really have a whole lot of guys in the North Division that I can see going really early first round. Jake Browning has the potential if he develops well this year.
I'm keeping on the Oregon train. I went Royce Freeman. Like I said, he's a good mix between speed and pop. I like him, and I think he's going to be a first-round pick. He could be the next Zeke, and Todd Gurley is the first-round pick.
Wow.
Balls out in the NFL.
You know, I like Luke Falk. I think he could potentially be a first-round pick this year. It might slip, though, because of a deep quarterback class, but I think Luke Falk will be pretty solid.
I mean, Mike Leach has a long history of having good quarterbacks in college that never work out in the NFL. I don't like Falk's game at all. I don't think it'll translate. I think he's a stud in college. Don't get me wrong. Like I say, he deserves a bigger spotlight now, but I don't like him in the pros at all just because I don't think his game translates because, I mean, you've seen it time and time again with Mike Leach in his system. A lot of his quarterbacks are system guys.
I see that, but I think Luke Falk could be potentially different. I mean, he's had just consistency, a lot of consistency, putting up big numbers at Washington State. I think it'll
You don't think he's a system guy at all?
a little bit. I don't think he'll be great in the NFL. I don't know. He might be like a low-end starter, but I don't see him being. I see him being a first or second round pick in the NFL draft next year.
Yeah, I was choosing between Falk and Royce Freeman. I'm going to go with Royce Freeman. I think he's a great running back. Jason said he could be like a Zeke Elliott or a Todd Gurley. That's really high praise, but I can see where he's coming from, so I got Royce Freeman.
All right, I'll go with somebody totally different here in Vita V from Washington.
I like that.
6'5", 332 pounds, a huge guy. Had 5 sacks last year. I really like his game.
All right, so I think that's all we got for the Pac-12 North today. Jason, what's coming up on the sports sermon?
Tomorrow we've got the Pac-12 South. Make sure you follow us on Twitter and vote on these polls we're putting out. Yesterday we put out who's going to win the Pac-12. Tomorrow is going to be one about the Pac-12 South. So make sure you look at that and vote and follow us on Twitter. But yeah, we've got Pac-12 South tomorrow, and then Wednesday we've got fantasy football running backs and a whole lot more to come, sticking with college football and fantasy football.
Yeah, make sure you follow our Twitter account, like Jason said. Answer the polls. The link is in the description of that. And if you want to see the rest of our college football previews, make sure to hit that subscribe button. So thank you guys for listening, and we will see you tomorrow with the Pac-12 South.